So who is Mr. SpaceWolf, my absolutely amazing co-host? Today we're going to find out. All right, John, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great, mate. How are you been?
Oh, I've been living the dream. As you can see, I'm here in my newly made studio. I wish I could show you around, but it's a bit mental. Yeah.
Tell me about it, man. I've been in the same boat. I showed you that panoramic pair of pictures. Like you saw what it looked like before, and you were like, God, there's space. It's bigger.
Yeah, it was mental.
Yeah.
Oh, what can I say? Well, we've been planning on doing this. We've been
Yeah,
planning
sure.
on doing this for like the longest time.
Oh, I know.
And there's just never been a time that's been good. So figured we'd do it now. First episode in a new place. Makes sense.
Oh yeah. Makes perfect sense. Give it a run,
Oh,
see
man,
how it's going.
I've got so many questions, so many. And I suppose the first one is, who are you and where are you from?
Well, do you want, I mean, which answer do you want, right? I mean,
Well,
the form that people know, I guess, is John Mulholland. I guess, I mean, it goes back to Cincinnati, Ohio. And my
really?
father and my mother, yeah, that's where I was born. My dad was working as a flight instructor in Cincinnati. He had been a helicopter mechanic in the Army in the 1960s, and the Cuban Missile Crisis basically delayed his discharge. He said he was sitting in his commander's office on the day of his discharge, and he said that his commander was getting ready to sign his paperwork, and he's got a phone call, and he answered it. And when he hung up the phone, he said, "Well, son, we're going to need you for a little while longer." So during the,
I can't imagine what that was like because they're literally in a nuclear war at that point.
Yeah, 61. I mean, geez, it was that close. I mean, we're talking about DEFCON 3 at that point.
Well,
if Khrushchev and Kennedy hadn't talked it out, I mean, you and I wouldn't be talking right now, probably.
Yeah, I can't even
imagine.
That's
in these circumstances, anyway. We might still be talking, but who knows where we'd be.
I might not even be.
Exactly, or what we'd look like. Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Either. I mean, I might not even be either. And it's one of those really weird things. If my dad had gotten the job he wanted to be an Air Force pilot. Turns out he's red-green colorblind. And because all of the controls are either red lights or green lights, you can't tell the difference between red and green, can't fly military aircraft. But he could become a commercial pilot because all the instruments on commercial aircraft are all dial and, black and white. So
that's mental.
Yeah, so if he'd have become an Air Force pilot, he'd have probably stayed in, wouldn't have just taken the discharge and gone on to flight school for his GI Bill money, and would have been probably wrapped up in the Vietnam War, and I probably never would have been. So it's weird. Yeah, it's weird stuff like that. And it makes me wonder if his red-green colorblindness, if that had something to do with my synesthesia, because I'm not colorblind. I'm extremely color sensitive. I can see color shades that other people can't. I pass color tests are whoa, you're on a different scale. Nobody can see that number usually. So
I was going to ask if that was related. I'll bet there's studies on it. There's got to be.
Oh yeah, they've done all kinds of studies, especially on me, and they just don't tell me about it. I found out later. That was the Cold War, man. They were studying the population and tracking us. I mean, they called it a different name, but there were programs that or were formerly known as MK Ultra, but they never stopped. I mean, I found out that, they took me out of elementary school because of different signs that I was showing, and gave me an adult IQ test. And it was out of a possible 140, I scored 120. Wow. So they paid really close attention to me after that. I didn't know it, but all these things that they were taking me out of classes for, and I was giving lectures and doing all this other stuff in front of adult crowds, thinking it was all fun and games, and kind of weird stuff, man. The 70s and the 80s were a different time in America for sure.
Well, yeah. I wonder what percent of the population actually has that ability to see sound.
It's I don't know.
Can't be many.
I've seen some things where they say it's probably more common than is really known because it has different levels, and it may just be something that somebody has adapted to, and they don't really think of it as anything out of the ordinary until somebody talks about it, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, that's always the way I look at it, or it's always the way it is for me. So who knows? But I know in extreme cases, it's really rare where it's debilitating.
Yeah. I always wondered about Jimi Hendrix because, like, to go from the music of the day, I mean, you've got to imagine what the music was then, and to take a guitar and do the things he did to it, which are commonplace now. I mean, if you think of someone like Chris Buck, if he was born or around in the 60s and 70s, he would be like legendary now. He'd have probably died of a drug overdose or what have you. But I wonder how much of that translates through to like Hendrix and, you know, the people we've lost.
Oh, I'm sure it translates a lot because of the way he described things in interviews and his approach. He wasn't really like thinking about it in a theoretical or technical manner. He was approaching it, you know, as like an extension. Yeah. And so it had to have been a synesthesia type thing for him too, like because he would place himself at very particular points in the electrical field to get tones that he could feel when the tone was right. Yeah. And sometimes they say he attacked, you know, his stacks because the tone wasn't feeling right. Like, you know, he just started attacking them because, like, you know, in that, I mean, in that state, he's basically like doing a shamanic ritual. Like when you watch the Monterey Pop Festival where he sets his guitar on fire with the Roncinol, everybody mistake it was either Roncinol or Zippo fluid. I think it was Roncinol, but I can't remember. It was one of those two. Those were the only two games in town, I guess. But and he had to do that because the Who went on before, and he knew that the Who were going to smash all their shit. And he was like, because the Who, they were like, they had seen Hendrix before, and they're like, oh, we got to go on and out Hendrix. And so they smashed everything. And so Hendrix is like, how can I outdo that? So he sets the guitar on fire and like, yeah, man.
Mad.
It's like, that's why, like, that's why guitar.
Yeah.
That's why.
So far going on our little tangents, we've managed to go from the 60s and the Cure of the Soul Crisis.
You know, hey, I'm Tangent Man. I'm Tangent Man. I can bring it all around.
I love it.
Yeah, so like, you know, being born in Cincinnati, I grew up there like till I was 3. My dad worked as a flight instructor at an FBO, and then he was offered a job with one of the largest fresh poultry producers in North America, Holly Farms Chicken, as one of their corporate pilots.
That absolutely sounds like, if anyone's seen like Chicken Run, it sounds like like an conglomerate from chicken. Sorry, I've got a 5-year-old. What can I say?
Oh yeah. Hey, but it was crazy because he was flying these Northrop Turbo Commanders, and he would work like just, you know, a few days on and then have a few days off, like because pilots have very strict regulations about how many hours you can fly a week and how many miles.
We do in the Navy too,
So he was the winner of Million Miler Awards for flying without any incident, any kind of mishaps, anything, no such as a near miss, was like featured in aviation magazines. But I got to fly with him, so I got to fly all over the country. And because of like his safety record and how conscientious a pilot he was, he basically flew all the celebrities. So any celebrity endorsers like Buddy Hackett, Dinah Shore, Don Rickles, you know, guys like that. Those are people that I hung out with as a kid. And some of them, some of these guys that would fly, like the executives and stuff, I'd play poker with them and clean them out. And to the point where they started warning other people that hadn't been on the plane with me before, don't play cards with this kid for money. Like, he'll wipe you out. So,
oh man, do you know what your initial upbringing or your interests sound a lot like my buddy Warren. He's a pilot himself.
Oh yeah, Warren and I. Man,
it's so similar.
When we first connected on Instagram and started talking, like we found out all kinds of parallels. We all have some of the same friends. He's he's a pilot for Peter Rowan, the bluegrass Americana artist, like world famous, you know, Free Mexican Air Force. Like basically Warren's the pilot of the Free Mexican Air Force. Like there's a song about Warren, he was like their
Yeah.
personal pilot. Like, to be a bush pilot, you got to be spot on. You don't mess around in the Alaskan bush. Like,
Yeah.
and have you seen some of the little things that he's been posting? He got wiped out of his account and had to like start reposting everything. He was he was going
have a
off.
real vendetta against him, mate. I don't know what it is, but he's another guy that's one of the most interesting people you're
I know,
likely to
yeah,
meet. He's
yeah.
a hell of a
Oh,
life.
totally, yeah. Lives in Alaska, like has
Yeah.
like we started talking about Porsches, we started talking about airplanes, like all kinds of
Well,
stuff. Things that are like probably best not talked about on our podcast because we'll get demonetized, that sort of thing.
I love it. Speaking of which, we've got all the usual suspects here. We've got Mike Rivers.
Oh, hey,
hello, mate. Dave Barry, Albus Band, Aaron, you're a legend. Justin Drawbridge, have you seen the pedals he's putting out at the minute? Come on.
Oh yeah.
Almost makes me want to not start
whenever
building
I can
again.
like peek my head away from all the stuff I'm doing, I just dove in. Like we had good weather and I could get stuff outside, and so I was able to make room and actually get to where I could move around in the shop, and it just started rolling. I feel your pain, mate. I feel your pain. It's such a process. Hey, what's up, memory lane?
These absolute fucking monstrosities behind me, these garage shelves.
Oh, I hate those.
2 days. Yeah. 2 days of swearing and snapping metal poles. There's loads of missing. I was like Homer Simpson trying to build
There's so many ways to lose a digit putting those things together too. I mean,
do you know what? I've never been so pissed off in all my life. I built 4 of them. I was like, I'm done. Yeah, cool memory lane. Awesome to see you. And as ever, Wadey listening on his way home. David, how's it going, mate? We're getting all the regulars here. I love it. Right. Anyway, so we talked early life as in your dad, but what about yourself?
Well, so growing up in that environment in Cincinnati, I kind of, my mom, was a housewife and was in like a little suburb. So kind of had not the city life, kind of had like the suburban, like kind of run wild as a 3-year-old. And I had a St. Bernard. Some of my earliest memories are like riding around on a St. Bernard named Haas. Like I would like ride him like he was a mount, and we'd go get the newspaper and he'd bring me back and I'd take the newspaper inside. But
St. Bernard's the whiskey dog, isn't it? The battle.
Yeah, the one with the barrel. Whiskey. Yeah, the ones that weigh hundreds of pounds. Yeah. He was, big enough for me to like get on as a toddler and just ride around like he was my personal steed. Yeah. So, hey, wolf knows wolf. From a young age, I've been a dog person. I mean, really, like dogs and I connect. So, but when I moved to North Wilkesboro, which is where Holly Farms is based out of, very small rural area. I mean, really, it's got the major claim to fame is Lowe's Hardware. This is where Lowe's Hardware was founded. We have what we like to refer to as Lowe's millionaires, all these people that became overnight millionaires through their profit sharing program when they offered their IPO and their stock popped. Like people just became millionaires overnight. So, yeah. And then also NASCAR was born here, automotive racing. And so I was heavily indoctrinated into that culture because the NASCAR driver for one of the major teams, Cale Yarborough, was sponsored by the chicken brand. Like they were the major company that sponsored his cars, the Holly Farms Chicken Express, I think. And I've got, photos of it and autographs of him. It was Junior Johnson's race team. And my dad was the pilot that basically flew him everywhere to all the races when he was available. And he's also the pilot that taught him how to fly. Cale like learned dual engine certification through my dad. Like basically when Cale got in the plane, my dad's co-pilot got in the back, and then like Cale took over and became co-pilot and pretty much learned how to fly himself to his own races, which he still does. It was a fascinating childhood. Yeah, man, I had so many different things. Yeah, and just the ability to appreciate what it was that I was being exposed to. And I was always one of those precocious kids that asked the adult questions, and I made people blush constantly.
I can imagine that. Memory lane electronics, finally the question we've all been waiting for. Absolutely, mate. I've been so interested to do this episode. It's been literally top of my list for ages. So yeah. But do you know what? All of the NASCAR and the flying, we can kind of see that in your builds, the aesthetic of them.
Well, I mean,
it really does come through.
it's just a small slice of it too, because here, like this is the den. This is where so many things happened. I mean,
Yeah.
Lost my virginity right back there. Like, over there, like had card games, like, underage beer drinking, like all kinds of like, the usual suspect nonsense of the 70s, 80s kind of stuff. The workshop that's just over on the other side of the wall, that's where I conducted so many science experiments. Like, in the 70s, you could buy a chemistry kit that, I mean, some of them you could get like pure sodium. You could get, I mean, do you know what pure sodium does in water?
Mate, I'm from Liverpool. We don't have things like that. We have football and nothing.
Let's just say things go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a tiny amount, like in water, it sizzles and then suddenly, I mean, it'll destroy a petri dish if you're not careful. Like if you put too much in it for a demonstration. Yeah.
That's wild.
Don't try this at home, kids. Standard disclaimer. This is 2024. Big Brother's watching you.
Literally is.
That's what I say to Big Brother. They're always watching. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, fear is the mind killer. That's another thing. Like total science fiction nerd. I have a brainiac cousin who got multiple degrees, who got me into Star Trek and astronomy and like all kinds of different things. Like, she turned me on to Carl Sagan. And the reason why I started watching like BBC programs and Jacques Cousteau, like anything and everything. I've just been a sponge my entire life. And so I've had so many things to
where did you start musically? Where was your first, like, what was the first? Because everyone has that one album or that one song that was like the first thing that really captured you into music.
Wow.
Because I mean, there's a point when you're a child and you go from like, watching wrestling and cartoons to being interested in music and that is like your thing. What is this, the one, album or even just an artist?
Man, the one thing, if just one, that's the hard one. Because, I mean, I started playing music before, like I could speak. I started like,
oh wow,
yeah. My mom was a music major and was in school at Appalachian State Teachers College, which eventually became Appalachian State University. And when she met my dad at a wedding, his best friend in the Army was marrying her first cousin, and my dad was the best man, and my mom was the maid of honor. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's where they met, and 2 weeks later they were married, pretty much.
That's wild.
Yeah, he kept flying back to Wilkesboro and like taking her on trips, like, and it got to the point where he told her, he's like, I'm going to have to ask you to marry me. It's getting too expensive to fly back and forth. Took her out in the middle of the lake on his boat and proposed to her. The same boat that I learned how to water ski behind. I mean, we've got a pretty nice reservoir here, the W. Curscott Dam and Reservoir, which was a Army Corps of Engineers project. And so I learned to water ski on that, when I was 5. Like, so I've had a lot of different extreme like opportunities. And in the 70s, man, it was balls to the wall. Just go for it. They turned us loose with yard darts and, here's a box of shells, a shotgun, and some 22s. Go have fun. Here's your motorcycle. I mean, and we were fine. And the thing is, we were fine. We had like gun safety courses in school. I brought my rifle to show and tell all the time.
So I actually, I really didn't get the whole gun thing in America. Being English, we understand that personal protection it's not a thing in the same way. And then I had an American guy come and work for me. He's a chief in the U.S. Coast Guard. He's now actually a master chief, but he come and work for me. And I felt so wild because he'd take his kids out on Christmas Day dressed as Santa with an AR, something or other. It looked like he was going to war, like, but dressed as Santa. Like, what are you doing, mate? And then the more he talked about it and the more he said, it's like, you got to understand, we were born from you oppressing us. I was like, okay, I get where you're going.
Well,
and so it's become more normalized type thing.
I think what happened at that time, like there were like direct educational programs that were being, implemented because of the Cold War. This was part of civil
Mm,
defense, that
yeah,
whole, like, I mean, we got up, we said the Pledge of Allegiance every day.
yeah,
There was a standardized like indoctrination routine.
yeah,
And when you go back and like look at it, it was, really, one of those things where they released movies like Red Dawn. I mean,
yeah,
so that all the high school kids in America got the message. It's like, if the Soviets invade, this is what you do. This is
yeah.
why we are teaching you this. Generation X, people, you do not mess with us. We were trained to be super soldiers, spies, and scientists, sometimes all three. Like
So,
it's insane what they did in this country for the sake of, what they called
so
national defense. It was like a social experiment, I think.
when you was growing up, what were the rules around guns as such? Do you guys have to have a permit back then to have a rifle, or was
No,
it just a case of buying one and then you've got one?
yeah, it was just a case go to the. I mean, a handgun you had to be over a certain age. I mean, it changed. Like, you saw things, especially as
Mm,
things got like, you know, more and more controversial. As we saw the fallout from PTSD from the Vietnam War and stuff like that
yeah,
with mass shootings and stuff. So, and then it just became like one of those hot button issues. You got the thing where people just like could jump on it and you knew you could get a response out of somebody one way or the other. But in rural communities, it's one of those things. It's just they've always been there, and
yeah.
so people that live in an urban area, like you don't have the same kind of environment where there's something that could walk into your backyard that could potentially take your life, your child's life.
This is
Any
my conversation with Warren is the same because he'll say, "Oh, I've got this gun for this occasion," or I'll go out with the something or other. I can't remember the names of them, but he'll have different ones for different situations. Like if he's going walking to wherever, he
yeah,
will take his certain pistol with him,
you
and
don't
it
you
just
don't go
goes
in the
through my
bush.
mind.
You don't go in the bush in Alaska without firearms. I mean, it's asking to become like bear confetti.
Yeah, that's wild to me. Growing up, if you had a tree in your street, like an actual tree, you were posh and rich. And now I've got a tree in my street. I'm like, I've made it, but
Hmm.
there was no bush and there was no, it just seems wild.
Yeah. And so
And all
it's
that's got to feed into your, not just your personality, but your creative side. Is all
oh
got to
yeah,
come from those
from
early years,
early years,
definitely.
yeah. And I was kind of like able to go back and forth between urban environments and rural environments because my grandmother lived in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I spent a lot of time in Indy, and some
Yeah,
really rough times in Indy too, man. I saw some crazy stuff. The first like knockdown, drag out racial fight where it was racially motivated was in Indiana, and
yeah,
not in the South. I really never saw any kind of racism in the South other than
yeah.
like, kind of like there were some people that were just obvious, but for the most part, it's
Yeah.
not as existent as stereotyped. There's a
For
lot of
those of us,
other
for
kinds of
those of us that
discrimination
don't
that
know where Indiana is in America, whereabouts is Indiana?
it's in the Midwest, like
Yeah.
next to Illinois. It's between,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
got you.
above Ohio and Kentucky. Like,
Ah, okay.
yeah,
I know where you are. I
yep.
mean, the closest I would know about Indiana is the fact that Brian One Place used to be the indie guitarist,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty sure that Axl Rose come from Indiana. But apart from that, I
Well, there's
couldn't have told you where it was on the map.
the Indianapolis 500 race too. So that's
Oh yeah,
another
yeah.
tie into racing, is because I would go to Indianapolis for the race almost every year. Like my
So
dad was an
did you
Indy.
move there? Did you, or was that just at a place that you would visit?
It's just a place I'd visit. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I pretty much stayed where I'm at right now until my college days, and this is where I went to elementary school and high school.
Yeah. And so what sort of musical influences around that time are we talking? What was
So,
the
man, like some of the earliest music I remember like being able to recall were all the different classical pieces that my mom would listen to. Things like Mozart, Bach, Beethoven,
oh really? Wow.
Rachmaninoff. Yeah, like one of my favorite pieces of all time is Concerto in D minor. by Rachmaninoff, Sergei Rachmaninoff.
Oh, mate, I'm uncultured. You're
Yeah.
not getting
So,
that from me.
but then also, as soon as I heard something that was like wild, like just unhinged, like rock and roll stuff, it just was like, oh yeah. So it ran the entire spectrum. If it caught my attention and it had, something that I guess triggered whatever kind of things in my synesthesia that like made me want to listen to it. Because there are some things that people like that if I hear it, I don't know if it's frequency or what, but it's just like instantly,
Ah,
nope, can't hear it, man. Not got to turn that off.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So
I like it. So when the hard rock and stuff come around, what artists are we talking? Who was like up on the
so we're
list?
like talking like Black Sabbath,
All right.
like, you got, Led Zeppelin,
Mm.
like, so you're hearing like the transition from like the psychedelia to like you're getting all the stuff from the
Yeah.
Doors. We had an AM radio station here that would play the full length version of Inagata DeVito.
Oh wow.
So you'd hear 18 minutes of that. So I mean, I got like a really wide range of stuff. And then there were
Did
like bluegrass artists that I listened to because this is a really, really rich bluegrass
that?
tradition.
Yeah. That's a
So,
that's a spectrum. I mean, the Doors. I was a late comer to the Doors. What a band. I mean, if you've ever read the book Wonderland Avenue, it's the autobiography of the kid who ended up managing them. Um,
I've not read that.
oh,
I've heard it referenced. Somebody told me about it.
oh, mate, it is the best book I've ever read, and it put me onto the Doors. Really, they were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's like a wide range, and all of that obviously has influenced your building in the future, which is why every time you post a video, I'm always like, wow, the gain on that, but the clarity, and
Mm-hmm.
clearly that's all there. Them sounds.
Oh yeah, there's just like certain tones, I guess, that like resonated with me from that era. That's why when I finally got my fuzz right, the Mosrite Fuzzrite circuit right, it was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's what I've been searching for. Because I'd given it up, so many times. It was like, nah, it's like what's going on. And then when I found the schematic that Small Bear put out for his germanium schematic, because Steve, I mean, he's one of the guys that was influential in me getting into pedal building in the first place because of the magazine article that he wrote and the fact that he was like one of the guys that you could buy components from that you couldn't find at Radio Shack. And
Oh man.
so
Was the Fuzzrite circuit like the circuit that put you onto pedals? Because for me it was obviously
no,
the Rangemaster, but what
that
circuit
was
was it that you built?
man, the first circuit that I built was
That
probably that
Yeah, the one that really made you, there's because I built a few pedals myself, but there was like when I built the Rangemaster, it all clicked, and I was like, right now I know where I'm going.
mm-hmm. Well, I
Did you
guess
have that moment?
the one for me was like when I first like built my first fuzz face, just
Yeah,
and I didn't know I was building a fuzz face because I was building a clone of a clone. So, at this point, like I was kind of like uninitiated into guitar effects. I was a professional drummer. I was a guitar hobbyist. I played a lot of acoustic guitar. And when I played electric guitar, it basically was like dime the amp and just go all out.
yeah.
I mean, I was
Oh
more
man.
of like a rhythm aggressive player, that kind of thing, just to get my yayas out.
And what was it about that circuit that like that really clicked with you playing? Was it because obviously a fuzz face quite bassy if you're playing
Mm-hmm.
rhythm and
Well, it was just it wasn't so much the circuit, it was just rekindled the spark because as a kid I grew up around all these electronics. My dad kind of has like a lot of like thread in here because of the fact that he was always around. I mean, there were days where he could like dive into a project, so he was building things constantly. And
yeah.
he came from this philosophy of never take a car to a mechanic because he was a mechanic. Never have anybody come fix anything at your house. You can fix it yourself and you can always make it better.
Yeah.
And so he was constantly tinkering, experimenting. He was on the cutting edge of every technology that ever came out up until the day he died in 2018.
Wow.
Like he always stayed up with tech. Like he was like the most tech savvy, like whatever age he was at any time. That's why I have all this tech surrounding me, and it's just a fraction of what I did have. Like so much of it, got gone.
Yeah.
So
Which we're going to get onto. Oh man, so that must have been like just a mental and amazing place to grow up. All that music and culture around, and then of course the
it
freedom that you had.
it was. I mean, I kind of took it for granted until I like heard other people's you know stories of how they grew up or like went to other
Mm,
places. You didn't have the internet. You didn't know like what it was like over here unless you went there.
yeah. Do you know what? I laugh about this because my wife doesn't remember the time when everyone didn't have a mobile phone. She's 10 years younger than me, so she literally everyone had a mobile phone when she was growing up, and she's like, "Well, if you agreed to meet someone, how would you know they were going to turn up? Like you just hope."
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like it was. I saw something about that just recently where they were talking about you called somebody and then it was Bisbing. He was talking about it. He's like he
Oh yeah,
went and waited for somebody for like forever, and the guy never showed up. And then he like talks to him. And why didn't you? She's like, well, I mean, why did you go? He's like, why didn't you leave? He's like, but because I thought you were coming. He's like how
yeah.
that used to be, like how you just need to sometimes just like take a minute. And it was because he said he and one of my favorite MMA guys, Paul Felder, Irish Dragon.
Mm,
Talk about a guy with some grit. He still does triathlons and stuff, and really like cultured on the sport. Like he can analyze it really well. But he and Bisbing agreed to like take the 5-minute thing where they just go out, no cell phones, no technology, just go sit and just give 5 minutes to like give yourself time to just
yeah.
be calm, and you don't have to do anything specific. Just don't do anything, and then jump into your day. Like this is because of this and that. And he says, I remember when, and that's when the whole phone thing came up.
I
So
just think
yeah.
I can't imagine it myself now. I'm glued to man. I'm
Oh yeah.
terrible.
And then when answering machines came out and we would
Oh
leave
yeah.
prank answering machine messages, that was so much fun. Oh man. Yeah. And your outgoing message, you could record like the craziest things on your outgoing answering machine messages.
Well, when the first color screen phone come out with a camera, I was in the Navy,
Mhm.
which
So I mean,
makes me
yeah,
feel old. So yeah.
I know.
So what about guitars? Like what was the first guitar that you got that you were like real precious about, or are you precious about your guitars? Because I'm not really. There's only
I'm
one or
not
two that I've
anymore.
ever really been.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a state of like evolution where materialism is kind of like beyond anything that I even worry about. Stuff
Yeah,
comes and goes at this point. Like it's just, a matter of like hopping onto the wave and surfing it. So,
yeah.
I mean, because I got so like into the idea of like stuff, especially
Mm,
with the vintage guitar market. And it was just like, I realized it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like that's still just a hunk of metal. It's
yeah.
not, it's not anything special, it's still just a hunk of metal. Like, when you started seeing bridges, uh, like original vintage bridges going for thousands of dollars, from, I was like, okay, this is getting out of hand, man. So, but it's that
Being
way with
told to
any kind
people
of,
like me.
I know it's that way with any kind of collectible. I mean, so
Mm,
and it starts getting to the point where I could let it like become an obsession. I have so many obsessive traits that I've got to rein those in. So I
mm.
figure it's better to like just focus on making things and using a lot of what has accumulated around me than trying to like accumulate anything else. And it just seems like more stuff keeps showing up anyway. So this is a conversation one of my really good friends and like fellow like professional luthiers, James Condino, and I had. He's like gotten down to where he had everything in a backpack, a storage unit, and a VW microbus. And
Wow.
like somehow or another he ends up with like 3 times more than what he like got it down from. Like he said every time it explodes, he doesn't know where it comes from. So he's like, I didn't intend for it to happen again. He was like, finally, this time I'm free. I can just travel the world. And like he would like go to the Himalayas and work Everest, and then he'd go and do whitewater rafting on the Colorado River guide the river guides and, go back and forth, or, he's another one of those guys. It's like when we met, we were like, oh yeah, you're one of me. So
Yeah, I've got to say, I collect so much rubbish. I can't help it, especially when it comes to gear. I
I
mean,
do
I'm sat
too.
here looking at a stack of amps that quite a few of them haven't been plugged in for some time. I can't help myself. Yeah,
So for me, like, guitars, I look at them as tools. I appreciate them, and I try not to, like, you know, destroy things that are historically significant, that sort of thing. I
yeah,
understand that, but if something's already been modified, I don't see the reason why you shouldn't go ahead
mm,
and, like, make it, the best that it can be. And I've worked on a lot of instruments for, studio musicians, and I don't want to do
mm,
any name dropping just because I'm not that kind of person. But, like, there's Grammy Award winners that have, had their guitars set up by me, and I used to do a lot of just private stuff before
mm,
the economic crash, and then the second economic crash. I mean, it's been one of those things where I've had to do so many different things just because of necessity too. You start realizing having a lot of different skills is valuable when you see all the different ups and downs. And I had friends that, like, they put all their eggs in one basket and they focused all of their learning potential on one subject, and they became the best
yeah,
that they possibly could be at that one subject. And then if that subject, suddenly becomes obsolete, or it becomes, no longer as high a demand for it, for whatever they were being paid to do that, then you're back to flipping burgers, manual label, or whatever.
yeah. Adapt and overcome is what
Yeah.
we say.
Yeah. So I'm just one of
So,
those. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but I was taking a Bauhaus approach to learning, like, just learning every discipline that I possibly could, and then seeing
so
how they could cross interweave and, like, become, like, synergistic rather than, like, just individual. So
did you have like a certain type of instrument or musician that you would gravitate to when you're doing this sort of work? Was it because for me it's Gibson guitars and that sort of style? I never really, I love Fenders, but I never really gelled with that sort of feel in my hands. Did you? Was you just across the board, or was
I was
there
all
one
across the
particular type?
board. I was all across the board. I mean, any type of musical instrument, stringed, non-stringed. I mean, I've built percussion instruments. I've maintained percussion instruments for people. I've worked as a drum tech for REO Speedwagon as an assistant whenever they came through. Um, like, I've done so many different things. It's like you said, people won't believe it. It's like, um, so for
I got a
me, it's
friend.
like, it comes to that, like, core love of music, like the musical being that I am. Like, I just, at one point, I just realized that it's always going to be that. It doesn't matter what. I'm going to have to work it around that. It's got to have music involved some way, shape, or form. So either playing it and getting paid to play it, assisting people that are paying, getting paid to play, that kind of thing. Like, just whatever and whenever, if it involved music, it was going to be where I was going to be headed towards. So,
Where did you start, and when did you realize that was going to be a like a life choice? Because there must have been a job that you started, or you got your first paycheck
well,
from
it's
it, and you're
funny
like,
you should ask. Yeah, funny you should ask. We'll see how this one transpires, because, I mean, I kind of knew that music was a real part of my life, early on. I always had music in my life. I played music. I was in band and started out as a clarinet player because my parents wouldn't buy, a snare drum. The evil band director told them that there were no used snare drums left because he had all the drum positions filled, all the percussion. Everybody wanted to be a drummer, and he didn't have any woodwinds. And so he told my parents that, brand new snare drums, $575, but this used clarinet for 135. So I became a woodwind player, and I was told
oh
that,
really?
oh yeah, I was told that if I, stuck with clarinet, then I could transition to drums and marching band. But I immediately, like, got a drum and started, and then we got a drum set and I started getting drum lessons. It didn't work. They didn't stop me. So, like, one of the first things I learned how to play that I requested was, Rock of Ages by Def Leppard. And my
Yeah,
drum keeper teacher came over.
Oh man,
that, and
was that one-handed or you?
Oh no, this is before he lost his arm.
Oh,
Rock of
before.
Ages was Rock of Ages was pre-accident.
I'm so I'm real late to Def Leppard. This is going to make me sound terrible. My last ship, maybe three years ago, Pour Some Sugar on Me. I'd never heard it. Never heard of them. I'd seen maybe the film or whatever, but the music wise, not a clue. And then there was a guy on my last ship that every time he had a beer, you knew it was going to be a party because that song would come on the we used to call it the Chiefs Mess karaoke, and that was it then. And I'd never heard of them, so I'm a newcomer. But what a band!
They were everywhere especially in the South, like in like the southeastern United States, they were huge. And so Def Leppard t-shirts, and
I can just imagine that being a mental time, like because what are we stuck in now? Taylor Swift,
man. Yeah, it was insane. Like the stuff that was happening daily, and like you just kind of felt like it was going to be, we're going to be in flying cars before you know it. And,
I think the question everyone wants to know is: was you wearing spandex and all animal print?
No, man. I was wearing parachute pants and wide neon laces because I was the first white breakdancer in North Carolina in my area.
Wow.
Yeah, I was spinning around
breakdancing too.
Oh yeah. I was I'm kind of like still weaving this whole story, I guess, because we were getting into music. So I mean, to become the breakdancer that I became, it goes back to scouts. Like I was a Boy Scout as well, and eventually became an Eagle Scout. But at Boy Scout camp, there were some kids from Charlotte, North Carolina scout troop, and they were breakdancing, and like they had a boombox, and like they were listening to Run DMC and Grandmaster Flash, and like doing all kinds of stuff. I was like, whoa, that looks cool, because I've always I was into disco when I was a kid. Like I would get out and I watched Soul Train. I would like mimic all the Soul Train dancers. And I'd get out and like people just thought I was like, they're like, what is this? So I would just, so I ate it up. I was a ham. I was like, oh wow, all the adults think this is cool, so I'm gonna do that. And then so I saw these kids break dancing. I learned how to break dance, and it had just started becoming in the culture. Like I think I saw Blondie's Rapture for the first time. And then that involved, some different breakdancing moves, and then also Herbie Hancock on the Grammys, his performance of Rocket. That was the nail in the coffin for me. I was like, I got to learn how to windmill. I got to learn how to backspin. Yeah. I mean,
it's really diverse that you went from like Def Leppard and obviously 70s rock through that scene as well. That's crazy.
Well, and don't forget the classical stuff too. I'm always listening to classical, and I'm also listening to bluegrass and like early rock and roll, like Carl Perkins stuff. Like we're talking like Chet Atkins, Jerry Reed. I mean, if I just named all of my influences, it'll be 2 hours, and like that interview, that's all we got time for. I mean, really. So
with regard to music, at what point did you realize that you had that extra sense, where you could, where everyone else didn't experience music in the same way, because that must have been quite a weird experience to realize that, hang on a minute, not everyone is seeing or feeling what I'm,
I think it was when one of the bass players that I really admire, that's a professional, a guy named Zach Page. He and his twin brother Andy were really good musicians that I had the fortune of playing with in different jazz combos and stuff. And he told me that, he said, it's not like you play drums. He's like, you're not even a musician or a drummer. He says, you're an artist. He's like, you're painting, it sounds like you're like making paintings and colors. And I was like, dude, that's exactly what it is. And it just clicked. That's what I'm doing. To me, it was just, I just thought it was whatever, like getting in the zone. And then I started paying more attention to it, and I started realizing it's like, oh, I don't like that sound because it creates a certain taste in my mouth. Or I don't like this one because I get a smell from it. Or I don't like looking at that color because it makes. And so I started realizing, oh, this is like something that I've had all along. And it wasn't until somebody started pointing out the way that it sounded like I was interpreting, things, that it kind of like dawned on me. but it's always been there. It was just one of those aha moments. But
Yeah, that's crazy. And it
and
makes
then
sense that you would be into different types of music because obviously it's it's a different like a different sense, if you like.
oh yeah. So if it's good music, it usually doesn't matter what genre it is. I'm going to be into it, and so
Yeah.
it helped me a lot in studio work because I can play any style you want. Like you put me behind a drum kit or like a percussion rig, and you want this style or that style. If it's a style that you know I've listened to and been into, I can do it. If you want me to play crappy, I can't.
Well, you want to hear me play crappy, Jesus.
At least not professionally. I mean, I can play
Yeah.
crappy on guitar all day long, but when it comes to drums, like that's a
Yeah.
different story. That's the foundation. Rhythm is everything. Mm.
And so where did that translate to working in the music industry or working some of the crazy jobs you've obviously worked?
Oh wow. So kind of roundabout stuff like going to college. I guess I was in this sort of like typical like pathway where you thought you had to get the really high paying job, like corporate success, like the 80s was all about the car, the clothes, the girl, like the
Yeah.
image, everything, Miami Vice, all that crap. And so I was going to NC State University as a like pre-dental, pre-med, because I had goals of becoming an oral surgeon because I figured that would be like the highest paying job I could get,
Mm.
that sort of thing. And it just didn't interest me at all. But I was like, well, this is what I was being told I needed to do. This is like, you have all this potential. It's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to play music.
Yeah.
And so I got to college and went into a deep funk because I went from playing music all the time, like having musical outlets, to not playing at all. And I just couldn't figure out what was going on and got into a deep depression, like started like, just having problems. And I went and saw a counselor because I was like, I got to figure out what's happening. And it
Yeah.
happens that I walk in to a counselor's office who is a high voodoo priest, Fahima Shanti. And he says, come in, sit down. Why haven't you been playing music? And what are all these issues you've been having with your dad? I didn't say anything yet. Like he just like saw right
Mm.
through me the minute I walked in the door. I was like, and he says, don't act so freaked out. He says, I'll explain everything later. And like went into this whole thing and told me I needed to go on a vision quest because of the things that came up in our conversation. Because he just like basically unlocked things, questions that I had in my own mind, doubts about certain things. And he said, you need to start playing music again. You need to find an instrument that you can like, have in your dorm room or whatever and not disturb
Yeah.
anybody. And so kind of, led from there to where, I was like, okay, I'm kind of doing the wrong thing, with my life. And I started focusing more on music and went and started following bands around, kind of tuned in, turned on, dropped out, and, went on Dead Tour. And so,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I'm at Phil Lesh's birthday party at the Omni in Atlanta. And I had tickets for the second night, but not the first night. And so I'm hanging out in the lot scene, just because that's where a lot of fun happens at the Dead shows. Not all the fun's inside. And so, um, I don't know how deep do we want to get into this? Like, do
Well,
we?
we're going deep, mate. We're going deep.
I mean, because this is definitely one of those things. Do we want to risk it? Shall I say?
Well, mate, we can go as far as you think is
Well, I mean, the statute of
acceptable.
limitations are up. I mean, so
Yeah, I mean,
all
I
right. So
feel like
yeah,
this is a
this
deep
is like
dive into you
this
as
is
opposed to our
yeah,
usual.
yeah. So like, I'm walking around the lot, and earlier that day, I had scored a really huge block of hash, like the
Yeah.
nicest hash I've ever seen. And
So
from
in America, sorry, mate, I've got to ask. In America, is hash like the green stuff or the brown stuff?
um, it
So
could be
so
both. I mean, this was the green stuff
yeah.
because this was given
Okay.
to me by someone who I thought looked like the Ethiopian church's depiction of Jesus Christ. Like he looked
Yeah.
just like the Ethiopian Jesus, and he was walking towards me like this. just in a steady pace. And we're walking, and right when we get next to each other, he goes, hashish. And I say, how much? Yes. And so we just dove off into a little corner, and he gave me this huge hunk of hash, and I said, whoa. And he said, what, too little? And he tore off another hunk and like gave me more. I was like, thanks, man. He's like, enjoy the show. I mean, that was what the Dead tour was like back then. And so
that's mental.
Yeah. So I had that, and some other friends of mine, we had dropped some acid. And so we're walking around, and in the course of the evening, I meet this guy who was just, really talking about music, and like we get in this really like deep conversation about music and guitar and all these different things and influences. And it turns out he's the guitar player for the opening act that had just finished for the Dead. And
wow.
Yeah, so he is tripping his ass off. They dosed him to the max. The Dead like gave him a vial to play with.
And so, this is back in the when we're talking dates wise, like this is
late
back
80s. Late 80s.
So yeah, it's not like when I was a kid. It was actual strong. I mean, that's why they say the Rolling Stones are only alive now, because back in the day, the gear weren't what the gear is when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this was, from The Chemist. Like this is what, there was all kinds of stuff out that I would never touch, especially after having this. And so basically, he just told me, and I was like, what's going on? And he's like, man, like, the band dosed me so hard, like I'm tripping so hard, like I just really need, like, have you got a joint? Like, can we smoke some pot? And I was like, well, I don't have any weed, but I've got some hash. He's like, you got some hash? I was like, yeah. He's like, hold out your hand. So I held out my hand, and he puts this little pewter figure of like a dwarf Viking. It's like he's holding the round shield with the shield boss and a like broadsword. And I'm looking at it going, wow, that's really cool. And he says, now hold out your other hand. And I hold out my other hand while I'm still focused on the little statue in my palm. I feel something wet in it. And I look over, and there's a puddle the size of a silver dollar in my hand. I estimate probably about 60 hits of the cleanest pure 25 I've ever had.
Shit. So that would probably be like a month's worth of supply when I was a kid.
That's
like,
walking
spread out between the whole estate.
That's walking up to the doors of perception and kicking them wide open. That's that's exactly what that is. And so fortunately I was mentally, prepared and strong enough to take that. But that was 3 days of peaking.
Wow.
I went to Hawaii.
Did you make it to see the Dead the next day? That's the question.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, I definitely did.
Hey, that was an experience. Was it the wall of speakers? What they call it? The wall of sound, is it?
Oh yeah. And the Olympic designed sound system. Yeah. They toured with that. That's why they would always set up for like, multiple shows. They didn't want to like just set that up for one show and then tear it back down.
Oh man, that's crazy.
But it was surround sound. Like, I mean, stuff would go around the arena. Like it was, by that time they had gotten it to where it was like just insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love this. And we've also got some comments here. Mike Rivers, too late to hold back now. Yeah,
it is too late to hold back now, man. Yeah.
Love it. So, and why would we hold back?
So
and we've also got Dev Tech Audio with us. Hello, mate.
Yes.
Yeah, so, that's class. I bet was that like your first big band show? Was it like as in someone known?
No, the first.
Or were they even known them?
Oh, the Dead.
Yeah, at that point were they like the?
Oh, they had already been through like a peak, and they were like kind of going through an underground resurgence. That was when the Touch of Grey album came out. But I mean, they were like at Woodstock.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean the Dead. The Warlocks, those guys go way back. They're Jefferson Airplane compatriots. They hung out with Janice and Jimmy and Jim and all those guys. Like they're part of that same scene. And so that's one reason why I got into them. Like in high school, I discovered the Grateful Dead through like listening to the Doors and Jimi Hendrix and all that. And so
that's class.
Yeah.
So you said you went to. Sorry, I'm interrupting you there because I'm so interested. You went to Florida after that?
No, I went to Hawaii.
Oh, Hawaii.
But I was still in the parking lot of it, the Omni in Atlanta. I was in Hawaii.
Mad.
Literally, I was in Hawaii. Reality
Mhm.
was Hawaii at that point. I was on a white sand beach in a lounge chair with the coconut drink and the umbrella. Nothing but beautiful, pristine blue waters in front of me, nice breeze running in. And anytime the drink got low, a girl wearing nothing but a grass skirt and a lei would come and hand me another one and take the empty one. And I
That
was
sounds
like,
fantastic.
wow, this is fantastic. And then suddenly I'm jolted out of Hawaii. And one of the girls that I went, we had driven my 1973 240Z with myself and two hippie chicks and all of our stuff. It's a two-seater. It's not a 2+2. And so like we had driven from Raleigh to Atlanta, and Spacey Tracy is the girl that I will refer to. She was trying to wake me up because I was sitting in the station wagon that we had like gotten some friends to let us use to like, you know, fold down so we could get some sleep. But this is way later, you know, this is what happened before I went to Hawaii is what the real thing is.
Well,
Hawaii is
I think
a
what
side trip.
everyone's wondering about the figure was where did the figure go?
Oh, I think I still have it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's class.
Yeah.
What a memento.
It's probably going to turn up whenever I'm unpacking stuff. Yeah. Like you said, you end up with too much rubbish. I'm the same way, man. It's so hard for me to throw certain things away. It's like,
That's got to be sentimental, though, right?
it is. Yeah. It's one of those things. It's like a little, you know, power totem of some sort. But
Yeah.
so what happened after that is like, I was like, well, I guess I'm in it for the long haul. Just slurped it all down. And
Yeah.
so I went, and there was the entrance of the Omni. I think it's the same place that they filmed the video for Fatboy Slim's Praise You.
Yeah.
I think it's the same place. I think that happened at the
That's
Omni.
wild.
I'm not sure. But that little veranda, it's similar. And there were these people who were having a drum circle and a dance circle there. And so like this guy had brought duffel bags full of different percussion instruments, and people were just like being handed out stuff, and they were playing, and people were dancing around and singing. And so I said, hey, can anybody play these things? Because, you know, I'm a drummer, I'm on acid. And he's like, said, yeah, man, you know, grab what you want. And there was this like little tri-tom bongo set. I'd never seen a triple bongo before. I was like, that's cool. So I sat down with the triple bongos and some other little noisemakers, and I just launched into the rhythm. And I grow like, you know, Shiva arms. I'm like, you know, doing all kinds of stuff. And it's just the whole thing just like becomes an organism. And we all like start, you know, grooving. And at some point, you know, I'm like having like multiple awarenesses where I can see things happening at different places all at the same time. And there's a guy who's walking down the sidewalk, a Pakistani or Indian gentleman, and you know, very well dressed. He's in an Armani suit, Gucci glasses frames, Gucci suitcase, like you know, everything to the nines for that time period. And he just stops dead in his tracks. And I'm just like peripherally like watching him as we're playing. And my hands are like, you know, octopus hands. And I'm watching people dance all at the same time. Like this is like reality is like, you know, one of those things where I can comprehend everything. You know, at that point, I could probably discern what individual photons of light were. But so this guy's standing there, and he just stops, and he just like turns and he looks at us with this look of like confusion and disgust. This is like, yeah, this is like triggered something in him. And he just turns and he just stares, and he's just staring there at us for a while. And he sets his briefcase down, and he lets out the giant, most massive primal scream I've ever heard in my life. Like just lifts it up and screams straight up into the sky. And we don't stop. We're all still playing. And he sits down right there on the sidewalk, sits down next to his briefcase, and just puts his head in his hands. And he's just doing this. And so he stands back up again, and he screams, and he sits back down, and now he starts meditating. He's like gotten into a pose, and he's meditating. And then he'll stand up every now and then while we're playing and scream at the top of his lungs. except now he's taking off like his coat. Then he takes off his shirt. And this is each subsequent time screaming till he's down to nothing but his trousers, barefoot and trousers. And then he joins the dance circle and dances the rest of the night. And I said, if music can do that to somebody that was that trapped in the Atlanta, Georgia corporate world, that it made them stop and reevaluate their life right there on the spot, sign me up.
Yeah. That's mad. Is that at this point, you've obviously decided that you're going to go away from education and move into music. Is this the point where you're like,
oh no, it was just I was going to continue my education. It's just, I wasn't going to pay idiots to tell me lies. Like, I just realized that I was going at that point too. They cut the budget at the university. So the program that I had originally signed up for, that I'd changed my major to, I had gone into psychology and botany, were my double majors. And because I had a science professor that kind of changed my whole view on everything, a guy named Bob Beckman. He's a NASA scientist. He's like one of the top NASA engineers for growing plants in space. And
wow,
just fascinating guy. Like, just, he could make learning about science fun. You talk about cellular division. He's like, like cellular division, it's not this like just random process. It's not like a couple of cells are like sitting around having a couple of beers, smoking a joint, saying, what the hell, let's divide. Like, there's a real process that happens here. And so it's instantly everybody's like, what? He said cells were sitting around drinking a beer, smoking it. And so he was the guy that like kind of broke the news before anybody broke the news, that there was this entire list of chemicals in commercial cigarettes past the 14 additives that they admitted to, that, he said there were about 300 and some. He said, we don't know what these do. He's like telling us in class. And he was telling us, if you smoke natural tobacco. And like, he was like an advocate for natural tobacco when it was, not even considered hip. Like, so, Bob Beckman, shout out to Bob.
That's wild.
Yeah. So
where from there? What made you go from? Obviously, you had a future as well. At that point, you wanted to be an orthodontist, but you had a future in education, high-paid job, all that. So what made you shift?
Well, so having my third eye opened at that event, probably, and then seeing the bullshit for what it is, and seeing like the rat race for what it is, watching people like chase, this carrot while being beaten with the stick. I just basically woke up and said, not for me, man. I'm going to do what I want to do. Screw you guys. I'm out of here. And then they didn't like that, and they arrested me. And I went to court and got the slap on the wrist. But it was a felony charge and everything. So, I get suspended sentences and all this stuff. And then I'm told it's going to be expunged. And then that's the thing, like the thing about laws in America, like they just don't stay. Like, they'll change the law on you at a moment's notice. They'll tell you 1 week it's this and the next week it's that. And it's kind of gotten scary to the point where like all of my stuff from college, like, I got busted for weed, which was a felony. Like, and
really?
Yeah.
Well, weed is a felony.
It was then. We're talking like the CIA drug war. We're talking like the omnibus.
Holy shit.
We're talking George H.W. Bush during his third presidency, because he was already president during Reagan. Like, Reagan was the figurehead that, like, everybody loved, but Bush called the shots.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I watch Joe Rogan quite a bit. I'm a bit of a Joe Rogan nut, but he goes on about hemp not being allowed because of the paper mills, basically.
Oh yeah, that goes back to 1933. Yeah, that's 1933, and that's actually like a documented thing. They use so much racist language and conspiratorial language, and they called it marijuana because nobody knew what marijuana was. They all knew what hemp was, but they didn't realize that they were outlawing hemp.
Yeah.
Wait. Why are you taking my pants? That's my next pair of pants that you're pulling up out of the ground. Hold on. So
that's wild. Because you got to think. I mean, especially in the UK, if we're going to outlaw something to make people safer, it would be booze. Because over here,
Yeah.
mate, especially growing up for us, we could put it away, you know, and it's much more, you know, it makes people much more aggressive.
We tried that experiment here, and look at what happened.
Oh yeah.
And
that we used to
that was
ferry it over to you.
when they re-legalized booze, then what did they make illegal right after it was hemp?
Yeah,
exact timeline, man.
They
needed to have something to, you know, you needed to have something to fund the black ops, basically, man.
Well, yeah,
that's what it boils down to. Yeah. Having been inside the belly of the beast, I know too many things about these things, so I won't say anymore.
Right. Well, I got a medal over there somewhere for stealing oil. I mean, protecting oil.
Protecting oil, yeah. There you
go. Yeah. I have this argument with all my friends in the army, and he said, "Where were you in Iraq?" I said, "Doing the only thing we were there for, mate. I was out at the oil field to see."
Yeah, you're with one of the tankers, probably. Hey.
Yeah. Well,
you're escorting.
No, we were at the where they pull it out the deck. You know, the platforms. We call them O-plats.
Yeah. Yep.
A-bot and K-bot. Yeah, we're out there protecting it from the Iranians. Yeah. Although you wouldn't have believed it at the time because it wasn't as serious as it is now. At least we didn't take it that serious anyway.
Yeah. We're going to see what happens, I guess, in the next few months. I mean, it's definitely interesting times. I tell you, you guys are having a show over there. I don't even want to mention it for fear of getting like
my word. You're telling me, and especially with my job as well.
I know.
It's mental.
It's mental. Yeah. I mean,
I can't, mate. I just can't. The thing is, you wouldn't know it. Walking around the streets, nothing is different for me, ever, at all. It's the same as it's been for the last 30, 40 years, whatever. Exactly the same. But if you look on the news, holy shit, it's mental. It's just gone.
So. But so I guess, you know, from reaching that point and then realizing that, you know, if I wanted to like be truly happy, I didn't need to jump through anybody's hoops. And that so much of what popular culture was about and like trying to like, you know, do this or that based off of reasons that weren't, you know, coming from like a real genuine place inside of me, that was just pointless. So I just decided that, you know, music was where it was at. And one of the, you know, I'll do all kinds of different jobs. I mean, I've worked construction. I like knowing how to do a lot of different things. But like, if I'm like going to be doing a vocation, I want it to be like something that I'm really passionate about too. So if, you know, that's going to be the continuing thread throughout my life, even if I'm not making money at it, I'm going to be spending most of my time doing it.
So how did it come about that you left education? Which job did you go to from there?
So after all of that, I went and just pretty much conned my way into becoming a news director for a radio station. Just walked right in and, you know, it's like, yeah, I can do this.
Wow. So was that like an interview process, or did you just go in and say,
I just was looking for jobs. I went to the, like, you know, cause I was working a convenience store job, like late night, which has a whole different set of stories, man. And it goes into my whole martial arts training stuff too. Like that's a whole different interview. Like when we want to get into everybody was kung fu fighting side of things, man. Cause that's another thing. Being a kid, I watched kung fu theater religiously. I thought I could do all the things. Like, so I was jumping off the top of my roof, like, you know, I mean, like I said, they don't know what they created in Generation X, man. You meet somebody in like this certain age range in the States, especially from certain areas, you're going to be like, whoa, they broke the mold on that one. And so, because like, I mean, what they, you know, breakdancing, you know, like here, go spin around on your head on some concrete on cardboard. And
how many kids today will walk into a radio station going, I'm going to go for this job. I'm qualified. Let's have it. They just wouldn't. It's not a thing.
I mean, you know, I was like, just go in and I was like, I can talk on a microphone. I mean, I've been a ham my entire life. I was like, how hard can it be? And, you know, how hard can it be to read with, you know, and in today's news.
And how hard was it?
Was it
awkward? No.
Well, I think a lot of it was because I had worked in theater too, like as a kid, like just doing plays, and in high
Mm.
school, like theater club, just basically living like this whole Renaissance life, like trying to do as much as I could. Like,
Yeah.
I guess a lot of it seemed like there was a time limit. You kind of felt that it could end at any time because you were living under that nuclear like threat. Like that was
Yeah.
always one of those things that they reminded you of. It could be tomorrow, you
Oh,
know.
really?
Oh yeah,
See,
that was the fear mongering that like that kept everybody, on a certain track. Like, that's how
I've
you
got a
can guide
friend.
people.
I got a friend whose wife's Russian, so she's from. There's things like England winning the World Cup. She just won't accept it. Point blank, never happened. Type things like that. That's a bit
Hmm.
weird. And I always just thought it come from that side of things. I didn't realize that you guys had the same sort of um, underlying messaging.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that you know, it, it's kind of subtle. I mean, you kind of have to really
Mm.
step out and understand that it's going on because you don't even want to admit that it's going on. One of the people that I really admire is Chase Hughes. Have you seen any of his stuff?
No, no.
He kind of lays this stuff out, like, and he is an intelligence operative. Worked for the CIA in
Mm.
psychological uh, aspects, and he talks about how they manipulate people. He's actually one of the guys that like flipped and wants everybody to know, hey, this is how we do it. This is how
Yeah.
it's being done to you on a daily basis. Just so not so you can go out and manipulate people, but so you can understand better like how it's being done to you and
Mm.
how to better communicate with people and like get past where we have to do this.
Yeah.
Like he's got some really good points, and I first became aware of him because he was studying body language of people right after the Trump assassination attempt.
Oh,
And so
really?
yeah, that was how I first became aware of him. I was like, whoa, this guy probably has some insights. And then as I listened to more of his stuff, I was like, okay, yeah, this is starting to make more sense, and yep, this is
Mm.
what they did at this point. I see how that worked. Okay. So, and a lot of it was reinforcing what I'd already figured out for myself too.
Yeah. That's wild. I mean, I'm thinking of like have you ever seen the series Lie to Me? I'm thinking that.
Hmm.
That blows my mind because I watched that and then I tried to watch out for people doing the same sorts of things to me in real life, and it's not all completely wrong.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
do
no,
spot it.
and it's one of those things that like it's made me more mindful of how I approach other people because I find myself
Mm.
doing certain things. I'm like, whoa, that's a learned behavior to get what I wanted, and it's not always the best way to approach it. Like it might have gotten me
Yeah.
what I wanted, and it's like one of those things. It's like, hey, I think it comes with age, like a little bit of maturity and seeing
Yeah.
what works, what doesn't work, and you know just
Yeah.
not giving a fuck
As
anymore.
the chief, it's usually shouting a lot.
Yeah, yeah, that too. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it depends on the situation. Like, if
Yeah.
there's a situation where I need to take command, I take command. And
Well, you recently had that tragedy of the weather in your neck of the woods, and you dove right into that. So that
I
kind of makes
mean,
sense.
that's, but I didn't really dive into it the way that, I've dove into other things. I mean, I've been more boots on the ground in different situations. There wasn't much I could do from here other than just like help people coordinate things like communication and stuff like that. But my dad, he was a ham radio operator, and
Mm.
being he was part of the scout troop that I like got my Eagle Scout award from because I started getting into it and working on all these projects, and he was like, wow, this looks like fun. And so he became a volunteer because he's a big kid. My dad never grew up, and I think that's one of the best things. He never grew up that hey, Dave, it's the death dealer. Evening, man. um
Hello, mate. How's it going?
Yeah, but like my dad never grew
Get
up, and
on.
it was like one of those things where sometimes there were certain aspects of that like that were annoying. Like
Yeah.
he had some immature aspects about him, but
Mm.
also it was really cool. So I'm trying to like balance that out where I can be like childlike, not childish.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
Oh,
just like,
yeah.
ha ha, funny, So
I'm in the Navy. We're allowed to laugh at things that are funny.
exactly. I mean, you just got to let it go, man. It's
Yeah.
like people take themselves too seriously all the time. I did at one point, man. I thought so highly of myself until, you know, the universe goes, oh, you think that, but try this. I was like, oh, I'm nothing. And people say, oh, you're so smart. It's like, I'm smart enough to know I don't know a damn thing. It's like,
Yeah.
that's when you really, when you know something is that you know nothing. Like you just
Well,
begin to scratch
I
the
was
surface and hope for the best.
I was watching a podcast with Cody. I think her name's Cody Sanchez. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's like a hedge fund guru, whatever. And what she said about billionaires is that they never want to talk about themselves. They're inquisitive about you, and no matter what, they want to take what you know and put it in their tool set, which makes sense. Because
It's
how
like,
else do you get to that sort of level?
you know, it's like when Josh was having his live stream yesterday, his short circuit where he's modifying the BD2.
Hmm.
And he's like, I don't know why you guys are watching this. This is so boring. I'm like, man, I just want to watch somebody else work and like absorb the technique and
Yeah.
learn. And I'm a visual learner too. So it's really cool to watch somebody do something. Cause then, you know, I can just like automatically like interface that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
made me like really good at like picking up on a lot of different things. Just one of my skills. I mean, so that's the other thing is I think it's really important to identify what I was good at and focus
Mm.
on those kind of things because there were a lot of things that I wanted to be good at, but man, no matter how hard I tried, like you know, I was not going to be better than a certain level at that. I was going to reach a certain level of proficiency, and that was it. That's going to cap it.
Yeah.
But these other things, it's like, well, you know, go here and you know find you know what makes me me, and then what do I have you know to put into a band situation or you know to this situation, a unit, a
Yeah.
squad, like you know a team, whatever.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. So from our radio station blag, you got into this job. Was this like a high paid job, or was it just a
yeah,
what
I
was
mean for
the
the
situation
time,
back then?
um,
Especially for your age as well.
well, I was 21, yeah, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
like you know they just advertised they needed a news director, and so it was an AM and a FM station, and so I like basically went in and just did an air check, which is you
Mm.
read some copy. We recorded it, and then we're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you sound good, you're hired, can you start tomorrow? I'm
Did,
like, yeah, sure.
so over that time, did you learn anything that you could translate into like pedals specifically, or into guitar electronics or music from being around that environment? Because I mean, there must have been some wild gear floating around just in
um
there alone, you know.
at that first station I didn't that first station ended up being one of those things where I realized that journalism and journalistic integrity was on its way out because that was where I was basically asked to, you know, go. They told me that there was no longer a place there for me because I was
Oh.
reporting the truth about somebody who was friends with the radio station's owner. It was a big public case.
Mm.
This guy was being fined the largest environmental fines in history in the area, in our state, and so
Mm.
they, you know, wanted me to bury the story because he's friends with the guy. And it's like,
Yeah.
you can't do that. You can't, you know, we're being scooped by the newspaper. We're the radio. People are reading about this in their morning newspaper, and we could have reported on it. You know, I had the information. He told me to bury it. I was like, I can't do that. That's not journalism. It's like, I got to report the truth no matter what it is, whether it's uncomfortable or not. And he says, well, there's
Yeah.
just not a place here for you. I don't think you're going
Wow.
to fit here. Yeah, that was it.
And
And
so from
so
that, where did you go then?
worked at a convenience store for a little while, and then another radio station job popped up because the news director for a local station that was closer to me, he ended up getting like a really bad type 2 diabetes infection, almost having to have his foot
Oh, shit.
amputated, and they needed somebody right away. And I was like, hey, you know, I've got experience, and so I didn't have to work, didn't have to have a but like a part-time job for like a couple of weeks, and jumped right back into radio. And this
Yeah.
was full-time AM. And this was like, you know, also got into disc jockeying, and it was all old equipment. So this is where I learned about the really cool
Ah.
stuff. Yeah. And the guy who was the engineer, the guy named Stoney, um, he was a legendary audio engineer guy. People from all over, like major studios would have him come and work on their vintage preamps and stuff like that. So I got to pick his brain about some things, but you know, he also is friends with my dad. So I kind of like had that in even before I got the radio station job, because my dad was an electronics geek. He was always repairing radios and TVs in the ham radio club. So I'd go to ham radio festivals. And sometimes daily trips to Radio Shack were not uncommon. Like, you know, just to see, or just to go grab something. It's like, oh, we ran out of resistors, or oh, I need this capacitor. Or, I mean, you know, I had a soldering iron in my hand and like was helping with stuff when I was 5. And I kind of got away from it, because you get into that point where you and your dad are like not really jiving anymore. And anything that like, you know, those things was like, well, that's his thing. And so I don't want to have anything to do with his thing. And if I tried to like do stuff with him, he would try and like, you know, control everything and like, you know, micromanage me. And man, you turn the screws on me, I'm going to screw right out from under you. I mean, this is the way it works.
I got a 17-year-old, mate. I understand that completely. Yeah, definitely.
Many have tried.
That second radio station's kind of where you cut your teeth in this sort of circuit world, if you like, because it's all analog, of course. Then,
yeah.
You're not talking about.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about the circuit world, I cut my teeth when I was 5. Like I designed that metronome that I showed you at one point.
Yeah, that's cool.
I might have moved it somewhere. I've been cleaning stuff up, but I mean, I basically built that out of a magazine article. And so what got me back into the circuit world was much later, like actually doing stuff with circuits. That was when I got out of the whole scene. I basically moved to Asheville. I got out of the art scene that I got into after my radio station job petered out. There was a whole different thing. And that's my Boone days. That's when I was driving back and forth to Boone a lot for the martial arts school that I was going to. I'd been on like a quest to find the right school. You know, so many like strip mall ninjas and, you know, like guys that, you know, said that, you know, they were going to teach you how to do this, and nobody had the right, you know, response. And the first time I walked into the school that I eventually went to, he says, "Why are you here? What can we do for you?" Not, "I'm going to teach you how to do this. I'm going to show you this." And so I had to say what I was there for, not what he was going to, you know, tell me.
It's not like an advertisement type thing.
No. I just walked into the school. It's like, so why are you here? It's like, well, I want to check out the school. So, what do you want to know? What do you want to learn? What's your philosophy? So I told him everything. He said, well, we might be able to help you here. It's like, first 2 weeks are free. After that, it's $35 a month.
How far was that from where you were living?
It was about 30 minutes. Yeah, like Boone and North Wilkesboro are fairly close.
Right, yeah. And so obviously this is a point where you're moving away from music as a focus of your time and moving into martial arts.
Oh, I'm still doing music full time too.
Oh, right. At that time.
Yeah,
too.
I mean,
cool.
I I do all kinds of stuff all the time. Like, you know, it's like, it's one of those things like I still do martial arts. I mean, I still do like, you know, bladesmithing. I mean, I'm one of those people that like, I just have so many interests and like so many things to work with. It's like, you know, I'll see that. It's like, oh yeah, I need to work on that. Or, oh, I need to work on that. And so it's just trying to keep it all just rolling. So yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I guess when I was doing the martial arts, that kind of got me into this situation where I really took my professional musical career off, because before then I was playing with the community college jazz band. I was taking improv classes. I was doing some guitar work, and playing with the symphony. I'd still played woodwinds and stuff like that. I played with William Chapman Neo, who was like the first piano player who could play the Emperor Concerto credenzas note for note, because he had massive hands like me. Like, my hands are almost the same size as his. I can palm a basketball. And so he, you know, that's a side tangent. But anyway.
Yeah,
so
we love a tangent.
you know, and I'd met some of the Boone musicians from there. There's like a, you know, a blues and a jazz scene and a club scene up there. And so at one point when I, you know, was coming back from one of my Tai Chi classes, I'd driven past this coffee shop on the main drag, like probably hundreds of times going back and forth. And a voice in my head this one night said, stop the car, turn around and go in now. Like, okay. So I did. I pulled a Yui, like just immediately pulled a Yui, pulled into the parking lot right across the street from this coffee shop. And I walked inside. There's a 6'7" Nubian, like dark from the heart of Africa, like standing there in front of some congas playing and singing in African. And there's an empty set of congas next to him. And there's all these people in the coffee shop watching, like, whoa, what's going on? And so I go up to the barista and I'm like, hey, you know, what's happening here? It's like, there's somebody else playing with him. There's an empty set of congas there. Because at the time I'd been playing congas in the jazz band. And she said, no, like he's been trying to get people to come up and play with him all night. It's like, oh, really? And so I had at this point, I had this big wool American flag sweater on because it was the middle of February. And so I just like go over and like pulled off my sweater and go walk up to the congas and stand next to him. I looked at him because I'm having to look up and he looks at me. We just smile and we launch. And by the time we're finished, there's people hanging off the rafters. They're making noise on everything. He's been able to pass out all the stuff he tried to pass out at the beginning of his gig because he wanted everybody to be a participant. He was from Zaire.
No one wants to be the first.
Yeah, he was from Zaire. And I mean, he had a whole bunch of scared college kids in there, man. Like they were like, what is this dude? I mean, because he is like this presence. He's like this 6'7". Turns out he's a prince. He was like one of the princes of the Congo of this one tribe. Yeah, like this dude, Mokengi Nkulo. That's just two of his names. His entire name is a paragraph. And,
you find that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. And so from there, like we were doing like the global village is what he called it. And it was basically like every Thursday we would show up and then we started getting booked at different places, but we would have this routine and people would be like coming in specifically for this. It became like the biggest event of the week for the coffee shop where they started paying us because they were like, yeah, he's like, dude, like without this, like we'd be broke. And so, but I mean, so for a few years I'm playing with this guy from like the heart of Africa, learning African rhythms and like just we're like doing all kinds of stuff musically. And so, and again, it was like a voice in my head, you know, basically said, stop the car, turn around and go in now. Because that guy was there and he was waiting for me. So
you still with drums as your main focus as an instrument, then I take it.
Oh yeah, I mean I can you know do that in my sleep, like, and I think that's probably like just something that goes way back into like ancestral history for me, you know, some sort of primal thing.
Yeah, I got a mate that can play drums really well. In fact, he's one of them annoying people that can play every instrument, but he's particularly good on drums. And I feel like some people just have a rhythm, or they don't. I clearly don't.
I finally figured out a lot of what, you know, I was trying to like achieve on guitar and not being able to achieve is because I was like playing too much like a drummer still. Like I wouldn't like just let it, you know, sing. You know, even in my fast passages, I was trying to keep them all so technically precise, like rather than like giving it a little bit of character and like. So I'm becoming a better guitar player, but I'm still never going to be to the level of what, you know, some of these guys are. It's just like, I don't have, you know, I just don't have it. I mean, I've got something different, but you know, like there's some guys it's just like, whoa, like Gilbert, like that mutant. Dude, Paul Gilbert is on another level.
He's got to be experiencing something else, right? And some of the things he's playing, it's like unbelievable.
Well, you can see it. I mean, he talks about it too. He's so cool because he like just shares stuff with you all the time too. He's like such a really cool guy.
He's real eccentric as well, isn't he?
Oh yeah, totally. He's so goofy. Like some of the old videos of him where he's like got the like crazy like hats on and stuff, and like all the costumes. It's just.
So, is it true that he's Buckethead, or is that not Do you think it's him?
No, it's not him. Yeah,
It's not him.
no. I've seen like where they revealed Buckethead finally. Like
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen like they finally unmasked Buckethead. Yeah,
Oh,
and
okay.
they've done a deep dive video that is no longer a mystery.
All right.
So
Okay.
yeah,
I thought it was Paul Gilbert.
I thought it was
Like
Steve Vai at one
playing.
point. I thought it was
Oh, yeah,
Vi.
yeah,
Yeah, because
yeah.
Vi's almost on that same level too. But then I saw Vi and
Yeah.
Buckethead play together and knew it wasn't. So
Well, yeah, that'll do it.
yeah.
So the coffee shop gigs, where did that go to? Was this?
So from there, like we got really well known and people started booking us for other gigs. And
Hmm,
of course, I was still also like doing little side projects with bands and stuff.
hmm,
But I was playing bluegrass with some people. I got hired to play washboard with a few different people, and so I'm just kind of like doing the musical mercenary thing, just
yeah.
working a lot of different jobs. When the radio station closed down, I moved up to Boone full time because I was going there all the time anyway for
Yeah.
kung fu classes and to play gigs. I was like, man, I can afford to pay rent up here for what I'm paying in gas driving back and
Uh,
forth. So I found an apartment with a couple of girls that needed a roommate, and that was where I weathered the blizzard of '93. That was crazy. That was
yeah.
a totally different story. But by this point, like we're doing pretty good with our little global village thing, and I've got like enough side hustles as far as like construction jobs and stuff like that, and
Hmm,
gigs that I could play where I was doing all right. And then I'm also like taking classes any chance that I get. Like I've always like been looking for knowledge from different people, like little workshops, like if a trade school of some sort, or if I could audit a class for free at the university, I would do that. And so just little things like that. But we were coming back from one of our gigs, and we came back, and I was going to go get some coffee because the coffee shop owner just gave us free coffee. Like at this
yeah.
point, like I just walk in, and he just took my mug down, handed me my cup, and said, "What do you want?" So uh, there was a jazz band playing, and I'm like, "Whoa, this is crazy!" And so we went up and we were watching them, and I had my ashiko drum in my bag. I had like a duffel bag, and they took a break and like, "Whoa, man, what do you got in there?" It's like, "Is that a drum?" It's like, "Yeah." It's like, "We're getting ready to do this really cool like Mungo Santa Maria cover called Afro Blue. You want to play it?" And with us, I was like, "Sure." And so like pulled out my drum, and like they did this song, and it's in 6/8, which is one of my foundational, just love 6/8.
Yeah.
Like the boom, 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 boom.
Hmm.
That just, I can go to war on 6/8.
Huh.
And it's like, so we're playing this song, and the guy who's playing the saxophone, this guy Brian, who ended up becoming like a famous saxophone player in some like ska bands and stuff like that. He like just takes off running through the audience, and he's running all around, and then he runs outside and he runs around the street while he's playing his solo, and like just like playing everybody downstairs, and runs back upstairs and finishes his solo because he got so freaked out because of what we were doing with the percussion and stuff. And then I started joining them on Mondays, and that's the place where I met some of the monsters that I played with, people that now are household names. I don't want to, like, again, I don't want to like start naming people, but
Yeah. Yeah.
people that ended up working with the Band of Horses, people that like ended up working with Donna the Buffalo, Acoustic Syndicate. There's all different kinds of people that came out of there. One of the first chair players for the President's Own Marine Corps Band.
All right. Wow.
So yeah, it was like a really, really small pond with a lot of big fish in it. It was
Yeah.
crazy. And we just went in there on Monday nights with no rules.
Yeah.
Avant-garde jazz. We'd play standards, but we'd play them our way. And and a lot of the guys that were part of the group, they were all music students at Appalachian State University, and there was a really
Hmm.
good music program there. So
It must have been a wild scene. Like
it
just.
was, yeah. I mean, there's an entire Facebook page devoted to it called Boone Life in the '90s because of
Ha.
all the music
Yeah.
that came through there, and like of all different varieties and genres. That was what was crazy. I mean, there's like you name it. Like for such a small
Mm.
area, like it had a lot of stuff. Like I had dinner with Outkast there when they
Oh,
were
really?
first starting out. Yeah, yeah. I was playing at a club across the street from where they were playing, and they came over and had dinner. And Andre and Big Boy like called us over on our set break and are talking to us about the music we're playing because we're doing like some hip hop bluegrass fusion stuff.
Mm.
And so we start talking about musical influences and stuff. And it was our dinner break. So we sit there and had dinner with them and talked about music. It was when they were first
Wow.
starting out, you know, like playing for like $3 cover at the
Mm.
local college club.
So when was that? Early 90s then?
I would say no, that would have been later.
But, yeah.
Uh,
Because
so
they were like, my youth was around the time that Outkast were.
it was in the 90s, but it was
Uh,
not early 90s. It was more
mm,
like late 90s, I think,
yeah.
when this happened. Probably like 95, 96.
Yeah.
It's kind of framed around some stuff that happened with other groups that I was playing with, like Snake Oil Medicine Show. And I was doing
Mm.
like a lot of different mercenary work at that time, playing in groups. And so,
Yeah. And where did it lead to from there then? What come from that?
oh, Lee, from there, see, that just turned into a lot of different bands. That started getting me up towards Asheville a lot
Yeah.
because I ended up being the drummer for ragtime, like blues, jazz kind of revival thing called the Blue Rags. But they're also like really heavy rock blues influenced. And
Mm.
they ended up getting signed to Sub Pop. That's the band that I basically left before because they had this crazy contract and I didn't want to sign it. And they were like, well,
Mm.
you know, we can get another drummer that'll sign it. So,
Wow.
but yeah,
What was it about the contract? Was it just being tied in, or was it?
owing $300,000 to a record company for the rest of your life.
Well, that would do it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what they did. Like they basically all each owed a large amount of money. Because if the record doesn't, you know, succeed, you still owe for the cost of production, the cost of distribution, the cost of promotion. It's not all free money, man. You know, that advance,
Yeah.
you pay that back with interest.
Yeah. Wow. I suppose that's a gamble you take, isn't it? If you and
Mhm.
no one doesn't believe in their own ability, so you're never going to say, "Oh, I'm not going to make it."
Well,
You
see, the
just
thing
assume
is,
you
like,
are.
I took the independent route from there and
Yeah.
ended up, you know, building it up to where I was making more than friends of mine that were signed. Like, they were like, "You did it the right way." It's like, well, we wish we'd never signed that contract because they own you at that point. They
I
own
mean,
your image, even they own the likeness of
that,
you in some cases.
well, that was the
Like,
time of actual record companies where they're like the big boys.
mhm.
Now it's a different kettle of fish.
It
Anyone
is a
with
different.
a
Oh yeah,
microphone or some sort of recording gear can make an
yeah.
album, and Spotify killed all of the.
hmm
Well, in fact, was
Although,
it even Spotify? Was it before that? But
well,
yeah.
see, the thing is, you're not making any money through Spotify. Spotify is killing your profit.
Well,
Don't
they're just
go.
starting now, aren't they, to pay? I
Mm,
think.
I don't
I
know.
think.
Like, it's
Yeah.
kind of sketchy. I mean, I'm still like a fan of direct sales. Like,
Mm,
I'll burn you a CD, I'll sell you a digital download, that kind of thing. But
mm.
I'm not going to go through those people, those third parties. Man, they screw you every time.
Well, I think that the key is YouTube now, isn't it? That's the thing.
That's the
Because
thing. And even then, you got to jump through their hoops in order for them to pay you. I know so many content
yeah,
creators that don't get ad revenue for their content because one little thing that they're like, oh, well, we can't monetize this because
yeah,
um,
yeah, you are driven by the. And to be fair, they pay more than everyone, but it's a lot less than what you think it's
it's a
going to
lot
be.
less than what you think it's going to be. Yeah, but
Yeah,
maybe
I've
that's
I've made
changing.
£20, £20.
I know.
Can you
Maybe
believe
that'll
it?
change because I'm
Yeah,
thinking, with what's happened and maybe some of these things that are starting to come to light because there's an anti-censorship environment. Maybe
yeah,
some of those restrictions are going to be eased and things that were demonetized just to the instance of a
mm,
a knee-jerk reaction now. Just because I said the words this or that.
yeah. Well, I think after this election period for you guys, we're going to see the rise of YouTube video podcasters being a new form where people get their information.
Well, I mean, they're already talking
That's what I
about
think.
that everywhere. Yeah, like that's what Musk
Yeah,
is saying. That's what
has
the
to be.
legacy media. That's what the legacy media is railing against. They don't want
Yeah.
to admit it, but it's the truth. I saw the writing on the wall
Oh,
way long ago.
I mean, yeah. I think this election is put that to bed, hasn't it?
Hmm.
But if that was me and I was in old media, I'd be thinking, how can I get in on this now
Hmm.
while it's
Oh yeah,
starting? I want to
yeah.
be the top.
There were a lot of
I'm
people
not.
that did. A lot of the
Mm,
people that are established now, they saw that writing on the wall and they jumped in, and now they're the ones with like the millions of subscribers, and everybody else is
yeah.
starting from ground zero. So
Well, I'm seeing on the news over here that Musk is on about buying MSNBC.
I think
Is that a thing?
that might be a little bit of a troll. I don't know. He just
If he
likes
buys
rubbing it
that,
in. If he
yeah.
buys
Well,
that, that will be funny. Joe Rogan
I thought
said that he would take Rachel Maddow's
that
position, wear the
I'm wearing their
same,
clothes.
yeah, wear her clothes and say the same lies. So
Yeah. But to be fair on Musk, I didn't think he'd buy Twitter, and he did. So
he didn't
what
think
else
he
is he
would
going
buy
to spend
Twitter
the
either
money
there for a second when they tried to make it a
on?
poison pill. He's like, oh no.
Yeah. Well, thank God he did. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oddly enough, that's the hardest social media thing for me to grow on. Like, I've been stuck at the same amount of followers because music content on there isn't what it's about, is it? Let's face it.
No, it's more social content and opinion and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah. But
Yeah, exactly.
I never wanted to get on Twitter in the first place just because I thought it was kind of ridiculous. And then when Musk took it over, I thought, well, maybe I'll get on it, but I just haven't had a reason to. I mean, you're the one who convinced me to get on Instagram, like, and finally,
Oh,
like,
mate, Instagram
so.
is a treasure trove of guitar stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, I wish I wasn't on Instagram because it cost me a bloody fortune. I see um, Rich Land runs Tethered to the Polestar. If you follow him,
Oh
he puts
yes, I do.
a fresh, cool guitar on every day, and I'm like
Mm-hmm.
salivating daily. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what am I doing? It's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
You combine that
See,
with that pedal show, and I'm basically a pauper.
I'm that way with like knives. Like if
Yeah,
I go to a knife shop, I'm like, oh, this is dangerous. So,
yeah.
and I had a
I got
really
to.
good collection at one point. Like, so.
It's what's the steel that everyone covers? Damascus, is it? Damascus
Mm-hmm.
steel, or
Yep.
so? Yeah, I got a friend in work who's a collector of that sort of thing.
When you
Yeah,
said
and
it, I
he's always
remembered that I had a Damascus piece right behind me, but I also remember that I took it and put it in the shop because I need to clean it. But
That's
I
like,
love
it wasn't that like
Damascus.
patent? Was it patented, the steel?
No,
And
I don't think so.
recently not. I don't
Well,
know.
there may be some, like, there are some steel formulas that are
Yeah,
patented. No, you might
yeah.
be thinking of like one of the more modern alloys, but Damascus is just a patterning where you're folding alternating layers of harder and softer steel together,
Mm.
and that they basically run a acid etch over it so that it shows up. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it if you just polished it out.
Yeah.
But it's just the showing of it, and I guess it
Mm.
comes from the whole tradition of sword making from that region, and makes it
Yeah.
stronger and more rigid and still flexible.
That's crazy. You find the guys on board buying all sorts of weird and wonderful items when the ship's away.
Oh, I'll bet,
Uh,
man. Especially when you go to a duty free zone. I mean, gosh,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, in the early 2000s, the worst places for it was anywhere that you guys were. If there's an American base somewhere, there'd be some sort of knuckle dusters and
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of crazy stuff. Like in the UK, it's not a thing. Like no
Mm-hmm.
one, you can't go to a shop and buy a knuckle duster. But
Oh man,
and
you
the American bases were just full of them.
you can go
It's
to your
mad.
local gas station here and buy one. Usually, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's madness
I
to me
mean, yeah. But
that.
a lot of that stuff is just for show. It's all toy. Like you put it to any kind of real use, it breaks instantly.
Yeah.
So you do get what you pay for.
I find that the whole availability of weapons things concerning from where I am now.
Tools.
But
They're tools. Those are tools.
that's what Warren says. But if
It's a
I lived
tool.
in America, I would definitely have a gun. So yeah. I already know what type I'd have. A Desert Eagle .50, 100%. Vinnie Jones.
All right,
rock
Vinny. I was getting ready to say, yeah.
stock. So when I was in Guam, the whole time
Have
I
you
was
ever
there,
shot
all I
one?
wanted to do was, well, that was it. So we went to Guam, which is like it's American as you like, isn't it? And there's
Mhm.
gun clubs everywhere. And all I wanted to do was shoot this bloody gun. And
Mhm.
and we went, booked in. We were drinking up for a few days before, and they still let us in, handed us weapons. What? My American friend was just like, just don't tell them, just don't talk.
No,
and
no.
but they didn't have ammunition for it, so I got to hold a Desert Eagle, but I didn't get to shoot it.
Mhm.
And I ended up with the Dirty Harry thing, whatever it is, the big
Oh, the 44
pistol.
Magnum. Yeah.
It was loud.
Was it a revolver?
uh,
Did they give you the
yeah, yeah,
revolver? Okay, yeah.
yeah. So my friend Josh obviously he's really into shooting, and he's like, "Do you want to shoot the shotgun?" He's like, "No, I've got one of them. I own that. I've shot that." He said, "Can I throw the grenade?" And they were like, "No." Like, oh, I'll just take pictures. so American.
Oh, there's a place that where is it? There's a place that you can do that. I've seen where you can like rent tanks. Like you can go shoot
That's
tanks and
insane.
stuff like that. I know. It's like
They had
that's
like a
his,
World War One
that's where he
machine gun.
needs to go. Yeah.
Like what?
I've gotten
Like what?
yeah, like a Vickers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's insane to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't believe it. I mean, we all turned up. We've been drinking all day, and I like, there's no way these guys are letting us in the door. A load of drunken Englishmen in short shorts and vests for a start, and there's
Oh
no
no.
way they're handing us weapons. Not a care in the world. No
What it
chance.
is they figured if anyone can handle it, it'd be you guys. You know,
It
if
was,
it had been, it's like, oh yeah, that's normal for them. But you know,
it's
any, if it
madness.
wasn't drunken Englishmen, no, you can't have the guns. But, okay, yeah.
It'd be weird if we weren't drunk.
Yeah, they'd be like, "What's up? Where's MI5?"
Well, I tell you what shocked me more than anything, because we don't see it a lot over here, was the people with weapons strapped to them. And Josh was saying to me that if it's concealed, it's illegal, or you need a special permit.
You need a special
But
permit.
if it's
Open
on the
carry.
show, absolutely fine. And I was like,
Yep.
that is just wild to me.
Well, it wasn't something that people did a lot until people started like really coming down on people, and so they were like, "If you're gonna like try and like do this to us, we're gonna like openly carry, just to remind you that like this is a right that we have, and we're not gonna let it be taken away."
Yeah,
I mean,
madness.
It is madness.
But I get where it comes from. If you look at, like, speaking about it epistemologically, you think, where does it come from? Well, it comes from being ruled by someone over the land and having to overthrow them. And then,
well, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, I think it came from multiple times, because not only did we have to overthrow like that, but then you tried to invade again in 1812 and retake it, and then we had the internal conflicts, and so I mean, and then by the time I was around, it's the whole like post World War II environment, and we've already had Operation Paperclip, and we've got the paranoids in charge of the CIA. The Fourth Reich has been established, and here we are.
Yeah,
that's basically what we're in right now, and I think that's what a lot of people woke up to. They're like, "Oh, we let them in," and now then, instead of World War II was the frog being thrown into boiling water. And what we have now is the frog being put into lukewarm water and the heat being gently turned up. But enough people realized it was getting too hot, and we jumped out. And they don't like that. So we'll see. They're going to threaten, all kinds of stuff. It's going to be a very interesting 2 months.
I think you guys have a very odd political system compared to us. So for us,
you mean none?
Well, for us, the left and right are like, we still have our top guy goes to Eton. They're all friends.
Yeah, I covered politics as a news director, and that was when I realized both sides are being paid by the same people.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter who we get to choose; they've already been chosen which choice we get to make for us.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, and that's what a lot of people realize, and that's why they didn't want Trump, because he was not their choice, and neither are any of the other people that came along with him. He was not their choice. So we're going to find out. We'll find out if they pull the plug and like say goodbye world, or if they say, okay, we're just going to go hide for a while and see if this all goes away, and if people forget that they're free. So we'll see. We shall see. And
as long as the stock market raises and my my £100 shares in whatever it is, MicroStrategy goes up, I'll take
exactly.
it.
I mean, at this point, like
Yeah.
I'm one of those people, like, back to the stories, like the extreme life that I've lived, like so many times that I should have died. Like, when I was in college, I like fell 30 feet and just bounced off the rocks that I hit and kept running because I didn't know I'd fallen, for one thing. Like, I was running in the middle of the night, and I ran right into a railroad cut. My friends that I'd taken off running from, they were trying to tell me to stop. And I thought they were mad because, like, they couldn't keep up with me because I was running too fast. I'm like, ha ha ha, you can't catch me. And then suddenly I feel nothing under my feet. I'm like, wow, I must be going fast. And then boom, felt, the impact. And then I'm back on the ground running. And then I start running up, and I realize I'm running up a bank, and I slid back down and I landed on my back. And I'm just laughing at this point. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. And my
Indestructible.
I'm basically one of those. Yeah.
Well, at that age, everyone feels like, if I did that now, I mean, moving plasterboard around that road off for a week. But at that age, you just.
Well, at that age, I was 21. I think. That was, yeah. But that was a whole different circumstance. That was like a long night of psychedelics. So, yeah,
that's it.
My friends and I, we thought we had wasted our entire trip in the design school laboratory, like where all the arts students were. We thought we'd been in there for hours. It had only been 15 minutes. And at that point, we were like, oh, wow, it's just beginning. So we started hiking all over the city. And one of my friends knew this shortcut to get to the Circle K. And as we're walking, I just got this urge to run. And that's when I took off. And they're trying to tell me, and it's the giant railroad cut, and at the bottom it's just gravel. This is boulders. So I fell 30 feet, face planted into that, bounced, and then ran and tried to run up the other wall.
And wonder if something to do with being relaxed, because
no, because I've had other things like that happen too. It's just I've been hit, and I just look at you and like, didn't take more than that.
I've never broken a bone ever.
Me either. Yeah. And neither did my dad.
I've a few times I thought maybe, but I officially never broken a bone.
I think it's one of those things that comes from the islands too, because like so much of my genetic makeup is from that area. Like the Mulholland family, like there's only a small handful of us in the States, like 8,000 of us, but we were really big over there in England, helping, William of Normandy become the first king of England, for that whole thing. And it was like, I think a lot of it's because we're the ones that survived all of that madness. You think about all the blunt force trauma that people were having to, and especially in like some of the places where you just fall suddenly. Like you can be walking around in certain fields in England and it just opens up underneath you and you fall 20 or 30 feet. And if you don't bounce, you're going to die. So I think we're probably like, some of those people that are like, all right, pack that bone in really dense. But yeah, they wore out diamond drill bits on me when they had to do like stuff where they had to like remove bone during an oral surgery. And the doctor said it's the strangest thing he's ever seen. He said, I've never seen bone this dense. And it would explain why I've never broken a bone. But I've had a lot of cracks like, where it should have broken. But I've dislocated things, and that's a nightmare, man. Dislocations. Oh, God.
Oh, I don't. I've seen some horrible, absolutely especially like shoulders and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The worst is the leg. Because, there's things that can get caught in that joint when you pop it back in that you don't want to be caught in there.
Yeah. I had something happen in my hip recently, and I was screaming. Like I thought, it was the worst pain I'd ever felt in my life. I was praying to black out. It hurt so bad.
Yeah. Oh, man. I feel like we've gone on a massive tangent.
We've gone on an hour and 53 minutes. Yeah, I know.
I know.
Like I said, there's no way we're going to be able to touch on all of it because I knew that once I started answering one question, you're going to have 20 more. Whoa, it's going to lead to here to here. So That was why I kind
I
of
just
thought maybe we should like do a recorded session and just figure out what the juiciest bits are. But also,
yeah.
it was good to like get your live setup going too and see what's
Oh mate,
happening.
I've
Hey,
been dying
who?
to hear about all this stuff for so long, and even after
Yeah,
all of that, it just makes me think that you're so much more like Warren than he's got some stories about being shot, and just it's so
I've been shot at.
similar.
I've not
It's
been hit.
crazy.
So yeah, yeah. I've had him like go past my ear. That's no fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you hear a
Oh
when you hear a
man.
bullet go that close to your head, that's something you never forget.
Yeah. It's not for me, mate. It's not. At least inside the
Not for
warship, you
me
don't know
either.
it's coming.
Yeah, I
It's
wasn't
just
expecting
lights it
it.
out.
It was not. It
Yeah.
was not anywhere I was expecting it. So I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
The,
boy, it sure makes you wake up when you feel it. You're like, whoa, that was right there.
there's, I can imagine there's nothing like it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Give me a
So,
warship any day.
yeah. I was gonna say, but warships they can be a little bit scary too, and like
Yeah, but you don't see it.
you don't see it.
If it's going to happen, yeah, it's. I feel like it'll all be over pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you
Until
don't
you
get to
talk to
see
the
them pretty.
Indianapolis survivors.
Well, I mean, in today's,
In today's, oh yeah, that's
you're
no matter
you're
what
into that.
no, today's.
It's just for comfort. We do all these drills, but it's more to make you feel good about yourself.
Well, I guess we're talking like in-game scenario, but there are some things where like
Oh yeah.
I've got a lot of friends that were in the Navy, like the washtub bass player for one of the most successful little independent bands that I was in called the Rib Tips. He was in the Navy, and like he talked about some of the disasters that could happen and some of the things that he saw.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so yeah, especially an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers are some of the most dangerous places on Earth, man.
Yeah, a mate of mine was on Ark Royal when the RAF dropped a training bomb through the deck, landed in his mess deck. He said it was carnage.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
you
yeah,
can imagine that. Like,
yeah, but
I imagine a real one. Like,
oh yeah, that would be no fun. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
no,
but
yeah,
yeah, I try and avoid all those things. I mean, that was one reason why I like got into martial arts was like I wanted to learn how to avoid a fight, and that if I did have to fight, I wanted it to be over as fast as possible, or give myself enough leeway to get out of there. That, and I didn't want to hurt anybody. Like I got in my first real fight when I was a kid, and I put a kid in the hospital. One shot, I put him in a coma, and I said I better learn how to control myself and not hit people. So, like, if I've had altercations now, I just basically like grapple. I'm a really good grappler, but if I hit somebody, I'm afraid of what it might happen because of the one time I've done it.
easily done. Yeah, like a boy from my school when we were like 14 caught a full-grown man and lights out dead, and then of course he's got a charge for well, I think he got manslaughter in the end. Yeah,
manslaughter because it's self-defense. If it's it's
it
aggravated
wasn't
assault.
self-defense. It wasn't self-defense.
Yeah. Well, also he's manslaughter because he's a minor, probably too.
I think that's what it was. Yeah, we were 14.
But the thing is, it's like like all these people that are like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's like if somebody attacks me and asks me for my wallet, you know what I'm going to do? There's nothing in here that's worth that.
Yeah, I think I must be the only person that hasn't been robbed in Barcelona. A ship of 200 people and everyone gets the wallet stolen. I think they probably see me and said, that guy's too drunk. He probably couldn't even get his hand in his pocket.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's got nothing. He's already spent it all on booze.
He's clearly drunk.
He's going to rob us. They're afraid you're going to rob them.
I don't think so. Not some of the states I've been in. But yeah, I mean, Barcelona's real bad for it. That Ramblers strip there isn't a single person who didn't get robbed. Madness.
Oh, I mean, I've heard all kinds of stories like in different areas of the Philippines too. Like angry swarms of street urchins will come and like, strip you naked pretty much, like leave you out there in your underwear.
I'm not arguing with them. There's whatever. There's no winning that.
Yeah. You just like, but like, why do these people still live there? It's like, you see this guy, like, he's like shaking his fist at these kids like he knows them. It's like, why do you still live there?
Yeah. I don't know. And as I say, I live in the poshest place I've ever lived now. There's a tree in the street. I'm basically moved up in the world.
You've got oxygen supply.
Well, when I was a kid, mate, honestly, if you had a garden, your mum and dad had a car, and the main thing was a tree in your street, made you posh.
Oh yeah. Well, I imagine every square inch in the cities too. There is at a premium. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Liverpool's a pretty big city as well, as far as the UK goes. Not like for you guys out there. I mean,
I don't know. What's the population of Liverpool?
I couldn't even tell you, mate. I'm not too sure.
Like the biggest, I think the biggest city in North Carolina is about 800,000 to 1 million.
Yeah. Oh, right. Wow.
New York, now that's our megapolis. You know, New York's massive. Yeah. So
I've been to LA. That was nice. That probably one of the nicest places I've ever been.
I've never made it that far out west. I got as far as Arizona. That's about as far west as I've gotten. But I've got family out in California. I just haven't made it out to visit them.
What struck me is everything's big. I don't know if that's the whole US. Like what we would call a curb, you would call a sidewalk. It's massive compared to the UK. I don't know why that amazed me. It's just like, why is everything big?
Well, like I said, it's because we built our roads after cars. You know, in a lot of places, like and even the areas that had carriages, they were built for like two-way carriage traffic or really big carriages, so they became perfect for roads for cars too. You had footpaths that you had to turn into carriage paths. And
well, we had them pesky Romans who invaded us and made lovely baths and straight line roads and stuff. So we were already off to a running start, I think.
That's true. Yeah. So you had the Roman measurement already laid out for how everything went, and the whole central axis. I've been looking at some stuff where they're talking about like Roman archaeological sites and like how they're like trying to figure out what was done by the Romans and what the Romans were building on top of, because that's what they have discovered. Some of the sites are older than they initially thought. They thought they were originally Roman construction, but it was really the Romans just building on top of something that was already there to put their stamp on it and say, see, we did it. So
fascinating, all of that. I used to love Roman history when I was a kid.
Me too. Yeah, like ancient history and
it's everywhere here, everywhere. Chester is real close to Liverpool. The city was basically a Roman settlement.
I got to go to Rome for a extended period of time. Like walked through like the Colosseum, did like a lot of different walking tours of the gardens and stuff, and just like you can look down sometimes, you'll find pottery shards from thousands of years ago. You're just like, it's just laying on the ground. That's how long it's been continuously inhabited. So
crazy stuff. All right, well, I think for this
wrap it up. Yeah.
I was going to say thank you to everyone who lasted this long with me and John just whittled it on with our. I mean, we'll probably end up keep talking now anyway. So maybe we'll do an after club in the future where we actually just don't talk about guitars and just go off on one.
Oh yeah. One thing. So for anybody else, is still listening to us like ramble on here, we'll call it. So
Dave Berry. Cheers, guys. And
Dave Berry said it is the interstate highway system. That's why it's the Eisenhower Interstate Highway. It's for massive troop movements from east to west and north to south.
Oh, really?
Yep. It's got to be able to handle tank traffic, and it's rated for a certain amount of weight for that reason. But that was
invented planes.
Oh yeah.
Love it. Right. Well, anyway, thank you, people, and we'll catch up with you on the next episode.
Yeah. Cheers.